Welcome, everybody, to building, mobile and desktop apps with .NET MAUI and Visual Studio, or Visual Studio and .NET MAUI, whoever gets top billing. This is Visual Studio Live. It's not .NET MAUI Live. Who is here and you are using .NET MAUI today? Yes. How many of you want to use .NET MAUI in the future? The rest of you? Oh, fantastic. So I'm going to assume from that answer that you want to learn a lot about .NET MAUI and what your experience would look like in Visual Studio and tooling and things like that. So I'll make sure to give you a nice overview as we start going into roadmap features and things like that. I am David Ortnow. I am a principal product manager here at Microsoft. I've been here for, not here, but I've been with Microsoft for 8.5 years, maybe a little bit longer. And all working on really the same product, the same technology. Started with Xamarin Forms, and now .NET MAUI, which is all of the same lineage. Before Microsoft, I had 20-ish years working in creative industries, enterprise, healthcare, building applications with a variety of technologies, and .NET is one that I love dearly. I may look young, but I've been around a long time. I am a grandfather. These are the important things for you to take away. When you go home and your boss says, "What did you learn?" You say, "I learned David Ortnow as a grandfather." All right, cool. I also like a lot of interaction, so buckle up. I do like feedback too. So you've probably gotten this in every single session. You're going to get it here too. Please do let us know what you thought, what we can do better next time. I do read all of the feedback on my sessions, and I'm always interested to know how I can improve and make sure that I'm bringing you the right content, because that's why I am here. It's not for my personal brand. It is to help you be successful using our products, because we really build them for you. The vast majority, 99.999% of all of the customers of my product are outside of Microsoft. Okay? And that is not the case for a lot of products that we have. So your feedback, your use cases, your business needs are super important to me. Please utilize this and any other means to shout at me and tell me what we can do for you. So you may have seen this in our build presentation. If you didn't, I highly recommend checking out the AI infused app presentation about .NET MAUI, because I'm sure you've heard a lot of AI related things, Copilot and whatnot this week. We've all been barraged with it in any media and developer news that you've seen. But really, it's reshaping how we build applications and the applications themselves, because we can do unprecedented levels of personalization. We can do context awareness like never before and turn that into actionable things in the application that make a difference, right? And mobile, I believe, is uniquely positioned to leverage so much of that device to create some really, really interesting, powerful, effective new experiences for the users of those applications, and make them more effective for your businesses. And then, of course, multimodal interactions. I say, of course, because this is a term that we use a lot. And maybe it's not one that you hear a lot. But what I mean by that is, rather than just your traditional input. So for example, here is our to-do app. If you do a file new MAUI application and you select the sample content, you get this to-do app, okay? This one's received some more love, and I turned some AI features on. But by default, this is what you typically have in an app. It's a form. You've got a keyboard. The user makes some choices, and they submit it, right? The keyboard, the touch UI, the UI itself is the predominant way that users use your applications today, which is why UX designers and designers in general are super important for the success of your applications, the usability, et cetera, et cetera. Tomorrow's application starts to look a little bit different, because we can start going on top of that, and you see this gradient. Gradient is synonymous with AI-powered things, right? It's magical. What if your user types in the project, the thing that they want to do, and now AI is going to go out and pre-generate some recommended tasks. In this case, what was my project was something like do a downtown tour of Seattle. And it came up with some reasonable, sensible advice for me. It knows the time of year, so it can provide good advice for the time of year. It knows my location. It knows my calendar, all those sorts of things to provide me with good, reasonable suggestions. Let's go a step further. Now you've got voice, right? And so imagine I'm talking to this, which I actually was talking to it when I recorded it. You believe me, right? Right, Alvin? You believe me. And I've just told it basically what I want to do. I'm going to go to downtown Seattle. I really want to see these things. I want to do this. I want to do that. It's going to take my voice and it's going to do not only a transcription, but it's going to make sense of that non-structured information that I gave it with a little bit of rambling. And it's going to turn it into structured data that matches my database, my domain needs, right? It's going to validate it against whatever rules I have in place for my data so that I can actually save it to the database, persist it in the cloud, and do all those businessy things that I need to do. Here's a slightly different example, but it's using the video, right? A camera, it could be a video feed or anything like that. And it's basically what you see. I know you can't read it, but it's a recipe for banana bread, which I love banana bread. And if it doesn't have walnuts in it, it's not banana bread. I'm sorry. That's the truth. Walnuts are a must. And so it's taken this recipe and I asked it to, as you can see in the additional instructions, I asked it to turn it into a shopping list, right? So rather than just the information that was presented as step-by-step instructions in the screenshot, it's actually transformed that based on my need, based on my context, turn it into a shopping list. So these are some of the things and very simple examples that you can start to imagine AI doing for your applications. Maybe you have a field service application, right? And your technicians in the field, maybe they're wearing gloves and they can't easily type, so voice is a more natural thing for them. Or maybe they work in a loud factory environment and they wear gloves, but they need to do something. Taking a picture of something with the appropriate AI assistance could make sense of that and turn it into whatever actionable data type you require, right? Has anybody been thinking, pondering, exploring these kinds of scenarios for your needs? Are you going to go do it after this? All right, I got one smile and a nod. Everybody else is like, there was nothing better during this session, so I'm here for the lulls, right? For the laughs. So this is what I would call tomorrow's app. At the top, it's not just a list of tasks, but it knows where I am, it knows the time of day, it knows my calendar, and it's presenting to me tasks at the top of my screen that are most appropriate, most urgent. And it's not overloading me with it because I've told the app, hey, go to my tasks. I've got a huge list of tasks. What's really the right thing for me to be working on? Here's how I would prioritize it. And then it presents it to me in that fashion. And you can see it's telling me on the flip side of these cards why it's presenting. Why is it prioritizing this thing to me? We talk quite a bit about responsible AI, and that's super important. Being able to demonstrate to the user of your applications that AI is involved, but also why AI made the choice that it made. And that helps them build trust with the result, but also provide feedback and just have a general understanding of what's going on. We as developers, and I say we as developers, how many would you say you are a developer in the room? Okay, so I'm talking to most of the audience when I say we as developers. We as technologists, that probably covers everybody, right? When we're using AI for our jobs, and I as a product manager, I'm using it not just for coding every single day, but I'm using it for research, market research, user studies, and all those sorts of things. If it just goes off and does something magically, but I get a bad result, and I can't see how it arrived at that result, then I'm stuck, right? And I lose trust in that particular solution that I'm trying to use. So we want to make sure as we're building the same kinds of AI-powered functionality into our applications for our customers, that we're also thinking along these responsible AI lines. And if you're looking for guidance on that, we have a whole website and team dedicated to this. As a matter of fact, in some of our recent blogging and things, we've really kind of celebrated the industry-wide work that we have done at Microsoft on responsible AI. And I think we have there's some things in the news. I'm remembering it was in an email, and I don't know if it's public information, but it's cool stuff. We're doing cool stuff. All right. So client app development, is it still a thing? Is it actually important anymore? Has the world moved beyond desktop and mobile apps? Well, if we look at these general market numbers, we get that there's over 1.8 billion Windows and Mac devices worldwide, which is increasing. As a matter of fact, I updated this from an earlier statistic earlier this year. It has already grown like 0.3 billion. And then we have over 5.2 billion mobile devices worldwide, just counting Android and iOS, not counting things like Harmony OS, which is a growing new mobile OS. Previously, it was based on Android. Now they have their own operating system that they're transitioning to. So clearly, there's usage there. What I hear a lot from companies that I talk to is that workers are actually using their personal or company mobile devices to do work. And they're doing it in the same fashion they do their own personal use. So consumer behavior patterns have really infiltrated how people are doing their work and the devices they're using. Even if they do have a desktop device or a laptop device, they're still doing more and more of tasks for work on their mobile devices. So this is an industry-wide trend that we're seeing. We have research to substantiate this. You may have observed this in your own lives. How much of your work, you may not consider it work, but you're reading articles and you're probably not just consuming information, probably generating work as well from your devices. And with the ability for AI to assist you with voice and with other non-typing means, you will probably be able to do even more from your mobile devices. So at Microsoft, we invest in this client technology space across a wide array of platforms and frameworks, everything from Windows native to cross-platform native, hybrid, and web. And today, we're going to really narrow in and talk about the spaces that .NET MAUI plays in, which is going to be cross-platform native and hybrid. Primarily the Blazor hybrid. Sometimes we'll refer to it as .NET MAUI hybrid. Either way, it's Blazor and .NET MAUI. It's an Oreo sandwich, and it's delicious. And if it were to be dipped in milk, I'm not sure what the milk would be, but I'll have to come up with something. All right, so let's level set real quick. What is .NET MAUI? MAUI was too cool of a name, so we split it into an acronym that you don't have to remember. And then we capitalized it. It's multi-platform app UI. And essentially, it's Windows, Mac, Android, and iOS. From a single code base, you can go to all of them. Now, it's going to look very similar on all those platforms, but having the native user experience is super important for the end user to feel comfortable on those applications. And so from the very beginning, that was the choice that we made, and we've really stuck with it. Now, if you want to go to what we call a pixel perfect across all platforms, you absolutely can do that. And there are libraries out there that support those scenarios that work with .NET MAUI. Skia Sharp is usually the base drawing engine that runs most of that. And then you have awesome control vendors. Progress Telerik is out there. They have a booth. You can go check them out. You've got Syncfusion, you've got DevExpress, you got Infragistics, you got Mesius, and then a whole host of community, maintained libraries. And they will offer you controls that are in many cases based on Skia Sharp, so you can get consistent UI everywhere. And so that's more analogous to a Flutter paradigm if you're familiar with Google's offering for Flutter. So what is the architecture? How do we do this? So across Android, iOS, Mac, and WinUI, and WinUI 3 is in its own category because it's not technically part of .NET MAUI since it's another Microsoft team and it's already got .NET, so we didn't need to .NETify it. But Android is, Java Kotlin, iOS is Objective-C and Swift, and then Mac Catalyst is Swift and Objective-C as well. So how do we surface that to .NET developers so that .NET developers can use all of that? We do what's called a interop binding. And so that's where you get essentially a one-to-one API where we are invoking the actual native APIs in the native SDKs. So it's not faking it. It's not recreating it. It's really just controlling it through .NET, right? And so the UI you get is native UI. If you had built an application for iOS using Objective-C or Swift, and it's a UI button, and you do a .NET MAUI app and it uses a button and you deploy that to iOS, the actual UI that gets rendered is a UI button, okay? And so that means that things like accessibility, it's all the accessibility functionality that every native application gets on that platform. We get out of the way and we let the OS and the platform handle what it does best. Keyboard interactions, text, multilingual, all those sorts of things you get. You also get all of the non-UI native functionality of those platforms. So let's say that you're on iOS and you want to be able to access the microphone, the camera, the accelerometer, GPS, Bluetooth, all those native things. You want to get into secure storage. We have APIs for all of that stuff. It uses all the native pieces of those SDKs, but you only need to work with the MAUI layer because we've created the device abstraction. And so you work with that layer and all that common functionality that you regularly need, you write it once and it uses the native implementations everywhere. Now, what if we didn't create a cross-platform abstraction for a particular API you want to use or you need to use on Android, for example? Very simple. It's a leaky abstraction. And I used to think leaky abstraction was a bad thing because it's leaky, right? Like I've had kids. If the kids are leaky, that's a problem, right? Anybody know what I'm saying? Nobody? All right, come on, a chuckle. I appreciate the chuckle. But what this means is we don't make it hard for you to get through the abstraction to the native UI. As a matter of fact, with multi-targeting in .NET, I think we introduced that in .NET 6, multi-targeting is the ability for you to do basically, if it's Android, use this code. If it's iOS, use this code. And you can do that right in line. Or you could even have separate classes. We make it super easy for you to write code specific to those platforms without a bunch of ceremony, without a bunch of boilerplate code. And all of that runs on all the Android devices, iOS devices, Mac, and Windows. I'll say that for the majority of .NET MAUI customers, the vast majority is mobile. The number of customers doing desktop specifically without mobile is very small. So in terms of how we prioritize work and where our strengths are, you're going to find that to be more in the mobile space. We don't find that a lot of customers choose native desktop as the way to go. They typically will do something web. Either it's a hybrid desktop application or it's a browser-based application, or it is a bespoke specific need for performance reasons to do desktop. And then, of course, your app code. We can't forget your app code. It's the least you need to worry about, or the most you need to worry about. It's probably the most you need to worry about. But it's the top of the infamous layer cake. So how is .NET MAUI doing? Do you want to take a bet on this technology? Somebody told you it's dying. I was talking to somebody just yesterday, and they were like, oh, yeah, I've got a blog post or an issue on my repo. Is this project dead? And I'm like, I've been here for 8.5 years. I've had that every month I've been here. It seems to just follow certain projects around. I come to understand that it actually means they care. They get value from the product, and they really don't want it to go away. So that's fine. MAUI is doing great. So we shipped initially in .NET 6. .NET 6 was not an amazing release for us. .NET 7 was basically .NET 6.5 because it was only 6 months later. And it really was there to catalyze the ecosystem to build their controls, to get services running, etc. And I tried to encourage our customers to not use it except for exploring. But, not everybody listens to me. Now, .NET 8 turned out to be a great release. And the efforts that we put into core quality and bug fixing and completing the product were very well received. We saw numbers increase greatly. And then .NET 9 shipped last November, and easy to say it's our latest and greatest, right? But equally, all of our typical metrics are going in the up direction. Our Net Promoter Scores, our CSAT, we're hitting the highest numbers we ever have. Big testament to our engineering team's hard work through these wonderful yet tumultuous years of business. Everything's been like smooth sailing for y'all for the past 5 years, right? No heavy winds, no rocky. No, okay. So just a quick interpretation of these numbers on the slide. Year over year developers, that's what Y over Y means. Plus 17%, depending on the time of year that I do this. Sometimes it's anywhere up to like 30%, but it's always in the positive and it's always going in the direction. And I typically, for these numbers, took a 4-month window because just going month to month, there's a bunch of seasonality, right? If anybody here ever has to report telemetry numbers, you probably understand what I'm talking about. But issues created has dropped negative 26%, which I love to see. Although if there are issues, there are issues. But when you've got less bugs being reported, that is generally a good sign. But on the counter side, on the flip side of that, 4.7x the number of PRs created. Our contributors are going bananas. And it's not just the community contributors, of course. We now have a strategic partnership with Syncfusion, where they work directly with us, basically as a team alongside the team. And they work in our repository doing triage, doing tests coverage, doing issue validation, and then submitting PRs to fix issues. And so I was just talking to the lead engineer this morning, and he's like, I don't know what got into Syncfusion. They usually do 40 to 60 PRs a month. They're already at 90 something. He's like, woo, we got to get on that. So very, very exciting to see the level of contribution as an open source product. It's a great problem to have. And then in terms of us getting those wonderful PRs into the product, we continue to make improvement on our velocity. So 1.4x PRs merged, 4-month window year over year. So all of those are super healthy. We're just eager to do more because the appetite for the product is greater than ever and the community is all over it. So we want to make sure we harness all that raw power. Who's using the product? So we've got some very recognizable logos up here. And there are, if you take this and multiply it, I'd say by like 100, 200, tons more. I wish I could convince every customer using the product to give me their logo permission to put it on the slide. But very successful usage of the product for years and years. Some of these customers represent using essentially our product over the span of, say, 10 iOS releases, right? Without having to rewrite their applications. That's fantastic from an ROI perspective, right? That application has existed across that many versions of Apple breaking everybody without having to rewrite it. Come on, that's amazing. So I like to celebrate that. And then we announced this at .NET Conf last year, and then we had a session at Build. You can go check out this session. It's up on YouTube. If you look for .NET MAUI Fidelity, you will find it. I got to sit down with a couple of the leads of the Fidelity project, and this is their Active Trader Pro application. It previously was a WPF application that ran on macOS via Wine. I don't know if Wine was meant to be spelled W-H-I-N-E, but that's what a lot of their users do because it's slow. That was a gem of a joke, y'all. Come on. And so they have rewritten this in MAUI. We work very closely with them, as well as Progress Telerik has done a ton of work to help them maximize their data grid and other pieces. And so this is an amazing testament to what you can do with MAUI on the desktop. The amount of data that flows through this thing is unlike probably anything that you have ever seen. And it handles it like a champ. We did a lot of performance tuning to make sure that this thing is just stellar. And you can see just how many windows, each of those windows represents a different panel in their, what do you call that? MDI, multi-document interface. As a mobile developer, that wasn't something we used to build, so that was a new acronym to me. So super impressive stuff. Check that out. It's a great little chat that we had, and it's up on YouTube. All right. So a little bit about what the .NET MAUI experience is in Visual Studio. So the main area that we've been investing recently in Visual Studio is in the Visual Studio Code side of things. So previously on the Mac, we had Visual Studio for Mac. That was sunset, is it a year ago? 2 years ago? A year ago? And so that was, not great. But it did open the door for us to fully enable Visual Studio Code for developers to use anywhere. And so the wonderful thing is that at this time, it works with XAML, it works with C#, it has tooltips, auto insert, color swatch pickers, which I didn't even know it had color swatch pickers. That was like an awesome revelation to me. Hot reload. If you're not familiar with hot reload, I will demo it, I think. We'll try to demo it. I don't like polish and, prep a bunch of sanitized demos. I just start coding things and we see if it works or not. That seems more real. But hot reload is essentially you're debugging your application and you make a change to the UI or to the logic, and it will patch the running debugging application without having to do a rebuild cycle. That's super valuable for MAUI applications because the debug deploy cycle tends to be quite a bit longer than developers, say, doing a web app or even doing a console app or a server-side API, something like that. Those build cycles and deploys are much faster. And that's somewhat just the nature of the complexity of doing mobile and desktop development. So hot reload comes in clutch there. Xcode sync support is for applications that are utilizing the native storyboards or nib files for their Xcode pieces of the project, and they need to synchronize those between the .NET context and the native Xcode context. So we have enabled that via a .NET tool. iCore Debug is the latest and greatest, best debugger that we have available. The reason that's noteworthy here is because prior to this coming into the world of .NET MAUI, we used the Monosoft debugger, which basically was a good debugger. It was built specifically for mono scenarios, which were the mobile optimized runtime scenarios. But it lacked a lot of the robust debugger things that you come to expect when you're doing deep traces, when you're doing deep inspections of things, just generally all the really advanced things, the ability to do profiling and all kinds of other things. So iCore Debug is a wonderful step up. And I want to emphasize that VS Code is really the best place for doing your C# development. It's got the XAML support, but I want to just put a little caveat around that. It's going to be lacking compared to Visual Studio, where XAML has been a first-class citizen for decades at this point, right? So let's be realistic about our expectations for XAML in VS Code. It will be there. It will continue to work. I also want to emphasize here that you can write a .NET MAUI application completely in C#. You don't need to use XAML at all. It's all C# under the hood. And as a matter of fact, I'll show you in a little bit that it's even more C# now than it ever was. But you don't have to use XAML. So if you've got a dev team and they're like, XAML's old, XAML is dusty, I don't want to use XAML, they don't have to. We do find, certainly, that a lot of .NET and Microsoft longtime developers prefer XAML, and that's why it exists, and it continues to exist. And we were actually invested in it quite a bit in .NET 10, which I'll get to a little bit later. And of course, VS Code is wonderful because it exists on Linux, Mac, and Windows with the same experience. One of the concerns and complaints we heard quite a bit about Visual Studio and Visual Studio for Mac was the experiences were quite different. They came from different places. And so, bringing them together was a monumental task and one that not everybody agreed with. Personally, I want my tools to look and behave the same on both platforms. It makes me more productive. There's no meaningful reason for my Visual Studio Code to suddenly have different key commands just because I switched to Windows from Mac. And if you're wondering, well, how do I do all the other things? Good news. The marketplace for extensions in VS Code is fantastic. So of course, you start with the MAUI extension. That's how you get started in VS Code. You've also got an archive publish tool for publishing your apps out so that you can deploy them to the stores, Apple or Google or wherever. You've got Android tools to help you do things like Wi-Fi debugging to devices. And then delete bin OBJ, I think, is one of the must-have extensions. If you've been a .NET developer for any length of time, you've probably deleted a bin OBJ combination to get a clean state. You typically expect clean to do that for you, but sometimes there's tenacious files that just don't go away. So that's like a must-have extension, and tons of others. So highly recommend leveraging those because the MAUI extension is going to do what it needs to do and what its core, reason for existing is. And then the ecosystem really fills in a lot of the other spaces left behind when VS for Mac went away. All right. So .NET MAUI and Visual Studio, what have we been up to? So we introduced full page XAML hot reload, or I should say we reintroduced it. So the primary mode for XAML hot reload to make it super fast is it just replaces the part of your UI that you changed. That's great for most scenarios, and it is super fast, but there are cases when you actually need the whole page to re-render. So you can do that by clicking the little fire emoji in the debug toolbar. Full design time live preview, which is the actual image that you see here. I can actually interact with and code against the UI of my application without debugging. So you could almost think of this like hot reload without a debugger. So it's another great way to iterate on your application very effectively, very efficiently, and boost your productivity. And again, Visual Studio on Windows is going to be your premium best experience if XAML is your core way of doing UI. But there's so many other things in Visual Studio. And I kind of think that we overlook these things because we only talk about what's brand new and we don't really focus in on all the other tools that are already there. So live visual tree, being able to inspect the visual tree and see how deeply nested is my UI. Maybe that's why it's slow and I can flatten things out. Being able to navigate the visual tree and go directly to your code, very helpful. Live Property Explorer, the hot reloads. Did you know that you can actually connect your Windows machine to a Mac and develop iOS directly from Windows? Yes, you can. Here for a limited time. No, not for a limited time. It's actually been in there for a long time. And we've made improvements to the pairing to the Mac. It will install all of the dependencies that you need for your application, and then it will compile and return that in a remote simulator session right on Windows. And one of my favorite things is because you use Windows, and of course, surely every Windows device has a touch screen, you can actually use touch against the simulator right there on Windows. Mac can't do that. So that's +1 for Windows. How many of you are Mac users in the room? I didn't ask that question. All right, we have one brave soul. We've got a half a brave soul. Another very brave soul. That was a very highly raised hand back there. I do. My daily driver is my beautiful Mac M4 Max. Not going to brag, but it's a pretty beefy machine. I love it. But I have a new love in my life right now. It is this Surface, and I gotta say, the touchscreen really is a seller. It's great. All right. Hot restart for iOS is the ability for you to take your iOS device without a Mac, no Mac involved whatsoever, plug it into your Windows machine, and you can develop directly against that iOS device. Pretty slick. There are some limitations to that because basically it's putting a pre-built application on your device and then shipping over the code and running it in that environment. So anything that is more advanced will not work with that scenario. And so for those purposes, you do want to go back to the pair to Mac solution. But you've also got XAML binding failures panel, which I had forgotten about. That exists. So if you're struggling with why is my XAML binding failing, that panel exists. We also have SDK and device managers for Android. So you don't need to leave the comfort of your Visual Studio to be able to acquire new Android SDKs or to install new tools or to create new emulators for Android. One caveat that I do want to mention, because I ran into that with the new love of my life that I mentioned before, this is an ARM machine, and the ARM architecture on Windows, Google has not yet shipped an Android emulator that supports that architecture. If you have an Android representative that you know how to reach out to at Google, feel free to drop them a note and say, hey, where's my emulator? Why don't I have this? The world is so poor without it. All right, so let's do a little demoing. And I have a couple of applications that I did not open ahead of time, so let's go ahead and open them. So Visual Studio. So if you weren't familiar before, this is how you start Visual Studio. Everybody knows that. Now, I could create new applications, and maybe I'll just show this real quick. And there's really three new applications. I don't think I have the Zoom It tool on here. Oh, I do have the Zoom It tool. Oh, that's crazy. I've never presented from this machine before, so excuse my excitement. So there's really three main types of projects that you'll start a .NET MAUI project from. The one that we typically show and tout is the .NET MAUI app. .NET MAUI app is going to be a single project. Everything is right there, super powerful. It's going to work for a majority of scenarios. The .NET MAUI multi-project app is going to be a MAUI class library and then separate projects for each platform that you're targeting. There's a benefit to that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then we have the Blazor hybrid and web app. So if your app is going to be mostly Blazor UI and web is going to be a portion of it, this is a great architecture for you to use. We have a Razor class library where all of your Razor code would go, and those Razor components get shared between a MAUI project and a Blazor web project. So simple as that, and you get to share all that code. We have several customers doing that today. They love it. It's wonderful. All right, back to normal size. So let me go back, and I had some other apps already open here. So let's open this one. We'll zoom in again and go over here. So this is the typical structure of a MAUI application. You're going to have a platforms folder. Within the platforms folder, you have folders for each of the native platforms. So this is where the actual native code goes. So if we look at the main activity for Android, for example, and I scooch over here, this is going to be a MAUI app compat activity. App compat activity is an Android type. So if you've ever opened a Java or Kotlin application, you will open an activity file and you will see very similar code because, again, we're really just wrapping those APIs and giving you .NET access to them. So you see all those things. If you want to do native things, you want to do native SVGs and XML and strings and all kinds of other things in Android land, you can go to Stack Overflow, or I heard that Stack Overflow is actually not a destination anymore. It's now ChatGPT or Copilot. You want to go to Copilot, ask a question, it tells you how to do it in Android, and it gives you Android code. You can put that right here in the Android folder. It's pretty much going to work. If it's Java code, there's a little more extra work you do. But if it's a resource of some kind, it's going to work. iOS, very similar. You've got an app delegate and an info plist. Then Mac Catalyst, again, very similar. And then Windows, the things you would expect from a native Windows application. So when you have code that needs to be specific to those platforms, you can put it here. Let's say that I'm going to write a Bluetooth class that's going to do specific Bluetooth things for each platform. You can do Bluetooth service.cs, right? And you can have a version of it in the Android folder, version of it in the iOS folder. They're all partial classes. They're all the same API, but their code is specific to those platforms. That's how you do that's one of the ways you can do multi-targeting. All right, so the entry point for the application is really going to be the app XAML, but the main place to start looking at your application is going to be here. I have no idea what I just did. This is what I get for clicking buttons when I don't know what they're going to do. So this is the MAUI program. If you're familiar with the host builder pattern, that's exactly what's happening here. We're building our application context. We're going to be using a MAUI app. This app is the app XAML CS, the app CS that we'll look at in just a second. I can do other things like configure my fonts. Or let's say that I brought in another library. I might do something like configure essentials or configure MAUI community toolkit. Whatever the constructor pattern is for that particular library, I would end up doing that here. I can also do things like, let's see, what is it? Configure MAUI handlers. Now, what's a MAUI handler? So this is actually the architecture for MAUI's UI controls. You remember I told you that when you do a button in MAUI, it becomes a UI button on iOS. This is where I could come in and I could say, you know what? MAUI did a wonderful job with the button, but I want to use a very custom implementation of button for iOS. You could come in here and you could easily override it. So you can see I've got an example, even Dear Copilot is giving me an example of how I could do a custom handler. And Copilot's actually right. This is how you could do a custom handler. And then my custom view handler could be the implementation of the specific special things I wanted to do. Not only that, but wait, there's more. If I just wanted to change how that control implements the background color or any other property on that control, I can override just that. And all it is a couple lines of code here in the MAUI program or wherever I want to put it. But I register it here in the MAUI program. So tons of flexibility. I'm only teasing these things. You can check that stuff out. It's all in our Microsoft Learn documentation. But that's really what this class is. The MAUI builder is going to do all that stuff. And then if we go back over to, I didn't actually open it, did I? We go over to our app XAML CS. We're going to initialize it and we're going to create a window. Creating a window is essentially how we declare what UI is going to run my application. It can be anything I put in the window. Can be an app shell in this case, and I'll talk a little bit more about app shell. Or it could be just a content page, or it could be a tabbed page, or it could be a flyout page. A bunch of navigation concepts you can put here. I recommend shell as a starting place for everything because shell is going to make it super easy. Get out of the Zoom. How do I get out of Zoom, Alvin? I click this. That's what I'm going to click. All right. Whoa, that got super small. All right, cool. So app shell is essentially a non-visual XAML looking file where I can give it all the pieces of my application. And maybe I'll open another example that's more fully fleshed out. But essentially, I can add all the pages of my application here, and I can arrange them in the UI that I want to use. And then I can use URIs to navigate between them. It's a very powerful thing. I'm not doing it justice, but it also is the most performant way for you to build your applications. So I highly recommend using this approach. Of course, we support all the latest of global XML&S as well as global using files. And then for my resources, and this is the last thing I'll show here, because then I'm going to jump to a more full-featured application. I can customize my app icons. This is something, if you've never done Xamarin application development before, used to be really cumbersome. I used to have to create app icons in the way Apple wanted it, in the way Android wanted it, in the way Windows wanted it, all in different formats, all in different places. And hey, if you're doing it for the platform, you better do it in the bazillion different densities that platform requires, right? And so now you're managing all these assets. And you're like, oh, well, no big deal. I have a designer that I work with. And that designer is like, you want me to create how many varieties of this thing? No, thank you. So huge hassle. But now you just provide it with an SVG or a PNG, and .NET MAUI is going to resize it for everything. So you'll see things in the logs that say resizetizer. And that's what we're doing. We're doing wonderful, magical things for you. They're not super magical, so much so that you can't get in there and manipulate exactly how it does what it does. But it saves you a ton of time. So we do that for your app icons. We do that for the images that are in your application. You provide us with one file. We generate all the other sizes and densities that those platforms are going to require. You don't need to worry about it. If you got raw files like JSON files, Markdown files, I like to use Scriven files for my prompts when I'm doing AI things. It's a lot easier for me to edit when the prompt gets to be long. So I put my Scriven files there. Splash screen, very similar to your app icon. You're going to drop that here. It's going to get created for you for all the different platforms. And then styles. Of course, we provide you with a decent color style sheet, as well as styling for all the platforms so that your UI uses the same colors, the same sizing and spacing, et cetera, across all the platforms by default. And of course, you can come in and you can override all of that stuff. All right. Let's look at a more complex application. And I was worried I wasn't going to fill the time. Let's see here. Projects and solutions. Let's look at MAUI multi-project. Sure, save that. All right. So as I mentioned, this is just another way to create the same thing, but you're going to be managing multiple different projects. And the one benefit you're going to get from this, the main benefit you're going to get from this is that your build times are going to be screaming fast. They're really, really fast. Why is that? Because the Droid project in this example only needs to be built one time. But the MAUI multi project is the class library where you're doing the majority of your work. It's a class library. It's just .NET code. It can compile super fast. And it just gets reshipped with your application. So you get like sub 10-second turnarounds. To build and ship the whole thing with the Droid, even on a recompile, is going to be anywhere from 20, 30, up to a minute at times. So wonderful benefit. Downside, now you're managing NuGet dependencies and other dependencies across all these projects, and you can really get things messed up. It was a big problem for a lot of developers back in the Xamarin Forms days when this was the dominant architecture for applications. All right, let's go pick another project real quick. And I want to show you how the Blazor mobile web one looks. So I mentioned you've got web, you've got mobile and desktop. You can do it all. And then you've got a Razor class library. So in the same way as the last example I showed you, you can separate things this way. You're going to do the majority of your work in the shared project. It's going to compile real fast. And you just decide, am I targeting web right now and mobile? Or do I want to run this on web? Is this going to run in my browser, right? Super easy. All right. And then one last one. Let's see here. MAUI multi. No, that was the one I just had open. What am I thinking? MAUI XMLNS simple. And this actually touches on one of our new .NET 10 features. But let's take a look here at a little bit more of how these projects get structured. So I've got my global usings, my app shell. This is a more fleshed out app shell. So you can see that I've got a dashboard, projects, main, manage, meta. Maybe I'll go ahead and see if I can run this for Windows real quick. Framework, Windows. Well, I can just pick Windows machine up there, can't I? We'll let that build and run. But I've got my data, my models are all in here, all of my pages. These pages are created in XAML, very straightforward. But one of the nice things is that this is a very tuned down XAML page. If you've ever looked at XAML, XAML can be very verbose. So we've done two things in .NET 10. We have done global and implicit XAML namespaces. which means that we can strip out a lot of that stuff that usually resides at the top of the XAML page. And then we've also done XAML source generation. So if you've ever tried to figure out what does XAML render when it compiles, right now it compiles to IL, intermediate language, and then that gets swizzled in with the .NET assembly when it gets fully compiled. Nobody can read that except for like 2 people on the planet, and you wouldn't want to mess with it. It is gnarly. So very hard for us to troubleshoot as average technologists. With SourceGen, what it actually generates is C# code, which means we can do a lot more with it. We can do a lot more analyzing it before it gets compiled and built. We can do more debugging of it after it's rendered to C#. And it makes our runtime debugging faster, and it makes our builds faster. So super exciting there. So for example, if I start navigating around, you can see I'm pretty much, I can touch my screen. I should be doing that because I'm super excited about that. You can see how fast that transitions. I promise you that is way faster than if I were not using XAML SourceGen. All right. Don't have a ton of time left, so I'm going to go back to my slides. I know those demos were mind-blowing, weren't they? That was mostly just a general tour of how Visual Studio looks and works. Here's one that's going to blow your mind. So, you've heard about Copilot. Copilot does a lot of amazing things. One of the things that Copilot does that I don't think gets enough attention is vision. You can provide images to Copilot and it can do things with them. So one of the top things we hear in our survey feedback ever since I've been working at Microsoft is, I want a drag and drop designer. Now, it's not 100% of the people responding to our surveys, but it definitely is a loud minority. We're not going to do a drag and drop designer for .NET MAUI. It's not on the roadmap. But what can you do today that can meet some of those needs? So what you're going to see here in this video, don't need that anymore. What you're going to see in this video is an image being provided to Copilot, and then we're going to iterate on that with Copilot's help to create a login screen, all right? So it's as simple really as dragging and dropping an image and providing a prompt to Copilot. So we're going to implement XAML from the attached image. It's a login screen. Use this image source. So Rachel, my coworker, did this and recorded it. And very quickly, and this is a little bit sped up, but I also did this recently with some other UI. I did a Airbnb UI, I did an Apple Music UI, and it was smoking fast. So she's not even editing code directly, is she? She's just talking to Copilot. Here's the stuff I want you to do. All the things that you probably would have done with a drag and drop designer. And she has a design surface right here because she's using that live preview in without debugging that I mentioned. And she's getting great feedback, iterating quickly, and she can make all the changes she wants to make in a very short amount of time. Does that seem interesting? Yeah? You think your mom could do that? Your dad? Your parents? My parents are in their 70s. I think my parents could do that. This is the kind of stuff where I'm like, that friend who came to me because he knew I was a mobile developer that had a brilliant startup idea, I want to go back to that guy and be like, hey, that amazing app idea you had, you don't need me anymore. You can come do it right here. So look at the wonderful result that she's gotten off of this. And Copilot can just do all this stuff. It has the ability, it has the code, it has the visual context. All right, so here's another example. So this is more akin to a drag and drop designer. So Figma, super popular drag and drop tool, browser-based. There's also a desktop version of it. It has a community-based MCP, Model Context Protocol Server. And so you can install this MCP into Copilot, and then you can come take a frame from Figma. In this case, she's using one of my designs that I have from a Nike shoe shopping app. And she's going to work with Copilot to create this design. Think it's going to work? What do you want to bet? No bets? It's a pretty tall order. So what she does, she copies the URL that points to that frame, and she says, hey, implement this UI at this thing for the image. And it goes off. It reads that information in using the MCP. And then it's going to start building, and she has to give it permission. By the way, there is a setting in Visual Studio Code, at least, where you can tell it, don't ask me for permission. I know you're going to do things, just go do it. That's easier for you to go walk away and get your coffee and come back and see what magic it's done. If you can trust it, you need to know what it's going to go do, right? So as we're going to see, it's making its way through this design. That first rendering looks dope. Now, she did do a couple of things in preparation for this. She did prepare the images that it was going to need to place the images. But when you go look at this code that it created, it's legit. It is good stuff. My advice, and this goes for any use of Copilot when you're doing pretty much anything. If you know, hey, this control is being deprecated, this control is new, I prefer this pattern over that pattern, put that stuff in your Copilot instructions. And then make sure that Copilot is reading your Copilot instructions every time. The way that I like to do that is I like to tell Copilot to speak to me in a certain voice. So I started out with, talk to me like a pirate, right? And so every time it starts to do something, when it doesn't have a pirate voice, it doesn't go, arg. I know, oh, you didn't read my Copilot instructions, did you? I have another one that's a design color-based application. I said, talk to me like Bob Ross. And it starts talking to me about pretty little trees. It's wonderful. All right. So those are two very cool ways in which you can use Copilot Chat with an MCP or just straight up and have it do the UI designer type tasks that you would normally be looking for a designer for. Now, I am going to touch on .NET 9, and then I'm going to talk about .NET 10. .NET 9 shipped last year, November. You can hit that AKA MS link right there. All this information is cataloged for you in a beautiful condensed digest on Microsoft Learn, and you can go catch up on the new features super quickly. It's a page that looks like this. I'll click on it and scroll through it real quick. I'm not going to read a web page to you because you paid good money to be here. Right? You don't need me to read to you. Although I have been told by Scott Hunter that I should just have a reading program with my sultry grandfathery voice. But nobody wants that. Nobody. So, cool new things in .NET 9. Hybrid web view. So we've talked about Blazor web view, where you can have your Razor controls and you can have those rendered in device. No web server involved whatsoever. They're rendered in the device. And all the .NET code runs in the .NET process like anything else. Hybrid web view now is if you've got JS-based code, JavaScript-based code, you've got Vue, React, Angular, homegrown, jQuery from back in the day, all that stuff can totally run in this hybrid web view. And we've created the interop for you to be able to go back and forth between the .NET context and that web view context. This is something that customers have done with Xamarin Forms and .NET MAUI forever, and they've asked us to bake this into our web view. Here it is. And it uses very similar implementations to Blazor web view, and you can go a long way with it. So you can have more of your web UI developers participating in your mobile development here. Title bar. So this is something for the Mac and for Windows that we've long wanted. It wasn't part of the original .NET MAUI, but it's here in .NET 9. You can put things up in the title bar of the window. And then tons of other control enhancements. I want to highlight the compiled bindings. For performance reasons, if you adopt these ways of doing your bindings, your app gets way faster. So take advantage of these things. We work closely with the runtime team to come up with this. It's a bit more code to declare your types and everything. But when you do this, your app gets much faster. So we've got compiled bindings in code, compiled bindings in XAML. We've done some multi-window enhancements so that you can activate other windows from where you are. And then we introduced native AOT for iOS. This is something we're also working on for other platforms, but essentially it's like the turbo boost for your application, which is kind of funny that we did it on iOS first, since iOS didn't really need it so much, but it was the right platform for us to start with. It's coming now to Android as well, and that'll roll out over .NET 10, 11, and maybe even 12 releases. And then native embedding got improvements. Native embedding, you can actually go the other direction. So we've got the abstraction for MAUI, but what if you have a native iOS, native Android application written in .NET, and you're not using MAUI things at all, but you've got another project, because we know that a lot of our customers have dozens and dozens of mobile applications written in .NET. So what if you've got a library of shared UI things, and you want to bring that into your Android or iOS native .NET application? You can do that too. And that's what native embedding allows you to do. All right. So let's go back to slides. I probably have to reshare, don't I? Like unshared. And let's highlight a few things coming in .NET 10. All right. So what are we investing on for this coming release? This is coming to you. We've actually shipped Preview 6. Preview 7 will come out next Thursday. And then .NET 10 will GA in November. It's November of every year. We actually have a .NET Conf announced date. I don't remember what it is, but you can check it out. I highly recommend tuning in for that. Speaking of things to tune in for, did you know that we have a monthly .NET MAUI community stand-up on YouTube? It's the first Thursday of every month at 10 Pacific. So first Thursday of the month happens to be this Thursday, and we're going to have our good friend Frank Kruger on the show, and we're going to be talking about Apple Intelligence with .NET. So that'll be really cool. What are we investing on in .NET 10? It's quality, it's performance, it's simplicity, and it's modernization. So quality is really the foundation of everything we're working on. We will talk about some cool new features, but I would say that, a good 80, 90% of all of our effort in this release has gone to continued effort on quality. That's test coverage, that's solving bugs. You saw the PR trends and bug trend numbers earlier, and those substantiate that. Performance, the iCore debug is a big part of that. We're doing work on Core CLR and native AOT runtimes. Simplicity, the XAML stuff that I mentioned, the XAML XMLNS, and namespace work. And then modernization, we've got to have the latest and greatest, right? So Apple released their announcement for Xcode 26. So yes, of course we have Xcode 26 support. And here is video proof that you can have Apple's new Liquid Glass in your .NET MAUI applications. Why? Because it's native UI. We didn't really have to do much of anything. We just had to enable Xcode 26 and you get it for free. You didn't have to rewrite your application to have Apple's new latest and greatest stuff. Isn't that nice? There are some new things as well. There's a new tab user experience, and this will be coming to you next Tuesday in the .NET 10 Preview 7 release, and you can enable it using C# project markup like that. What do you get from the native AOT performance stuff? You get a much smaller app size, negative 49%, and you get a much faster startup time. That 484 startup time wasn't bad to begin with, but 367 is even faster. It's almost visually indiscernible how fast that application starts up. And this is based on the Sync Fusion toolkit and the application that I was showing earlier, the To-Do app. It is a big effort to enable native AOT in your applications, but the reward is there for you. So you'll do things like enabling publish AOT. That's going to generate a bunch of warnings telling you how to make your applications, your code, AOT compliant. And then you'll go do those things so that all the warnings go away. And then you can publish your application and reap those benefits. XAML source gen, as I mentioned, I'm not going to go through all those details. I think this video evidence demonstrates it really, really well. So XAML IL on the left, if you can see the clicks, there's a huge delay between when the click happens and when the navigation happens. Now let's look at the XAML source gen version, and you're going to see a click over there, and you're going to see it almost instantaneously go from one screen to another. These are debug builds. Debug builds are already going to be slower than release builds. So do not judge the performance of your MAUI application based on debug performance. Always do a release build to validate your performance. This is great for collection views and other scenarios that are super hard to work with. So when you have XAML source gen, or when you don't have XAML source gen, this is more of your debugger experience. You don't get any helpful information over here, right? There's nothing there. And the code looks like this. I know you're not going to read that code, but I'm just going to tell you, it's useless. You can't do anything with that. This is what you get with XAML source gen. You get real C# that is the actual implementation of that XAML file, and you get dense information from the stack, right? So lots of debugging information, and it goes on and on and on. Super wonderful. And so the global and implicit namespaces, I kind of highlighted this before. You can simplify those to make it less verbose. You do these implementation steps. This is all up on the Microsoft Learn documentation page, the what's new in .NET 10, so you don't need to remember all of this. But basically, your pages can go from looking like the behemoth over here, which, who wants that? I don't want that, to this over here. A lot better, right? So that's wonderful. When I present this to a crowd full of XAML developers, they start clapping and shouting. But, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so I will forgive you. And then you can also do things like this. We see all these prefixes, right? Poll to refresh, colon. What else do we have here? Controls, colon, cards, colon. Well, with the XAML XML analysis improvements, we can now omit those things and we can get rid of them. So makes the code a whole lot easier to read. If you really want to see where did that control come from, you just hover over it. It tells you where it came from, tells you the type and everything. All of our editors do that. We also have improvements to the edge-to-edge safe area. So this is important for mobile devices where we now have notches and, what else do we have? Weird forehead looking things. And then we've got dynamic islands and whatever Android, and you've got camera things now, just like right in the middle of the screen. You need to make sure that your UI is aware of those things and can deal with them. Typically, this was primarily an iOS-only concern, but in recent releases of Android, they've now changed and they added an edge-to-edge API. So in .NET 10, we're shipping a new API for this that makes it a whole lot easier. And by the way, as I mentioned before, I replicated the Airbnb UI, the Apple Music UI. Don't judge me, that is Sabrina Carpenter. And I also implemented the camera UI to demonstrate the different safe edges things. But I basically just took screenshots off of my phone and told Copilot to build that. That's literally all I did. And within 15 minutes of each, I had a recreation of these things. It's bananas what you can do these days. All right. Edge-to-edge safe areas, they work on different layouts, content view, content page, border. It's not something you'll put on every control, but these are the controls that they work for. And then you can say, I want it to work for none of the safe area controls, ignore them all, or work for all of them. I want you to obey all the safe areas. Or you can say, I want it to work for the soft input, the keyboard that comes up. So that if you have something that should reside at the very bottom of the screen, but when the keyboard comes up, you want that thing to continue to be in the same position, but above the keyboard, you can use this to denote that expectation. So this is a bit of an explanation of how you use it. And these things are analogous to the main scroll area, goes all the way to the top, and it's going to use safe area edges none. This one is the horizontal navigation buttons. So this button here, this button, it's a horizontal container in a grid. And so I'm going to tell it, don't do any of that stuff, obey the safe area. And I can do that just by not telling it anything. And then for this UI at the bottom where you have the reserve button, it needs to flow underneath that home indicator, that little black bar at the bottom. And so I tell it to obey all, and it will do the right thing. The content stays in the right spot, but the background flows all the way to the bottom of the screen. Hybrid is not to be left out. I have several improvements here. We've got intercepting of web requests. If you need to modify headers, redirect requests, supply local responses to things, you can now intercept all of those things, whether you're using the Blazor web view or the hybrid web view. If you have web developers, this stuff will be very valuable to them. And there really is quite a bit more coming in .NET 10. I did touch on the majority of these things. Actually, I touched on all of them. I got them all. It's like a Pokemon adventure. I got them all. So .NET 10 is going to be a really, really great release. Thing I'll leave you with, this is literally the second to last slide, is a reminder of how .NET MAUI servicing and official support works. So .NET itself has LTS and STS, right? Long-term and standard. MAUI is always 18-month standard support cycles. The reason that is because we build on top of the native SDKs. Apple and Google are shipping every year. Google actually is now introducing a new shipping cycle where they might ship twice a year, once in August and once off season, with at least a minor major release. And so we have to build on top of that stuff. We can't go 3 years on the same release. It's just not feasible. Everything from build tools to SDKs, et cetera, et cetera. So here is your reminder that .NET 8 for MAUI went out of support in May of 2025. So the MAUI project, the MAUI code needs to be running on .NET 9 at this point. That's the only supported version of that project. All the rest of the code in your solution, yeah, it can be running on .NET 8. .NET code there is fully supported for .NET scenarios. But the MAUI specific stuff needs to be on .NET 9 to remain compliant with, for example, Google has a new requirement that apps all need to be built against API 35, Android 15, I think it does. And Xamarin, if you are still harboring any Xamarin projects in your companies, that has been out of support since 2024. And at this point, most of the public stores are probably rejecting application submissions from those versions. That's them, that's not us. We didn't do that. So keep those things in mind. Yeah, stay connected and keep learning. I think you probably see this slide in every single presentation, right? So these are resources for you. And at the very end here, I will once again invite you to leave any feedback. We're pretty much out of time. There's 3 minutes if anybody has a lightning round question, or you're welcome to come up here. Or I guess there's a mixer kicking off outside. Sorry to the virtual folks, we're going to be in a mixer, but you can go to your refrigerator and grab what you want. We're going to go out there, right? Any questions in the room? Yeah, here, hang on. Is this the mic, Cam? We got a mic coming from the back. Gives you a couple of extra minutes to think about what you want to add.
Sorry, where was it at?
Yes, right here.
Yeah, just wondering if there's an AOT template.
So there's not an AOT template. The default file new project from MAUI is going to be AOT compatible. So the code that we're shipping is good for AOT. And you just need to do that little bit of XML that I showed in the CS proj. But yeah, that doesn't come in the template by default, simply because we didn't want to overload the CS project with a bunch of settings that not everybody's going to adopt.
Makes sense.
But it really is literally 2 lines in your CS proj. Anybody else? Got another one?
Previously, you mentioned about the Syncfusion integration. So currently, we have a subscription with Syncfusion where we have to pay for the Syncfusion controls. So you think we don't need that anymore since we have a built-in Syncfusion support in .NET 9?
Well, they're my wonderful partners, so I think that you should pay them. But so what I would do is evaluate which controls you're using. So last year, they actually open sourced a huge number of their controls. I think there's 20 plus controls now that have been open sourced as part of the Syncfusion toolkit for .NET MAUI. So evaluate that. And if the controls that you're using are all in there, then yeah, you don't need it. However, they are continuing to invest in those premium controls to make them worth paying for. So things like the scheduler, the calendar, the data grid, for example, those will remain in the premium offering. But you may find that everything you need is in the free one, and you can use that.
Okay.
And it is open source too, which is great.
Oh,
super. All right. 4:15. Who wants to go get a drink? Cool. Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate your time. We'll see you out there.